Yes. Okay, so welcome folks who are joining. I'm gonna kind of just kick us off and then introduce Pamela, who's our speaker today. And because we have a smaller group, we might kind of change the format of this a little bit, maybe a slightly shorter presentation and more of a group discussion if you have some questions or ideas you want to dig into with Pamela. So yeah, I'll just kind of kick it off by sharing a little bit more about Pamela. Pamela Toshner is the statewide lake and watershed protection specialist with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources and is also the Northwest area lake biologist for the DNR. She engages with partners, colleagues, and the public in the development and implementation of statewide water resources protection programs, and also lives in southern Bayfield County with her husband and twin daughters and enjoys outdoor recreation. So just a couple quick things before I hand it over. I always share that we have live transcript available under the CC if you want to hide it or change the settings, which is essentially making it larger or smaller, you can do that. If you have any questions, feel free to send me a message in the chat about technical stuff, or otherwise you can also put your questions for Pamela in the chat. And then later we'll have plenty of time. You could also unmute yourself too if you want to ask a question. And then just a little bit about the Lake Superior Collaborative. I think most of you here already know, but just in case, it's a watershed partnership focused on the Wisconsin portion of the Lake Superior Basin, and essentially is a group that promotes knowledge sharing, networking, and collaborative projects to enhance watershed resilience. We do have a new website link, a little easier to find, lakesuperiorcollaborative.org, if you have questions, or you can always email me if you have questions about the collaborative. So now I will stop my share and hand it over to Pamela.
Hi there, everybody. Let me get the screen up here. Okay, and you can see my screen?
Yep, looks great. Just the full slide.
Okay, well, thank you. And thanks to those of you who were able to join as we talk about healthy watersheds, high quality waters today. I know it's a beautiful day out. And the outside is pulling at us after a long, cold spring. So thank you. I'm going to be talking about a new statewide water resources program, as Erin mentioned. And before I get started, I just want to share that Luke Beringer, Renee Buys, and Erin Marty did a lot of heavy lifting with this program, and we have a broader team too, but I'm using some of their slides today. They couldn't be with us, but they're here by design with their slides. So I will be talking about the wonderful waters of Wisconsin. That's kind of our catchy branded name of the Healthy Watersheds High Quality Waters program. And I'll get more into why it's called Healthy Watersheds High Quality Waters. But first, I'm going to share a little bit of background. I'll dig into our modeling and assessment, and then talk about our action plan, which was just released in April. And along with that, I will cover resources, next steps, and we can talk through FAQs. And since the group is small enough, I think feel free to, put comments or questions in the chat, or can folks unmute themselves too and just ask questions as we go?
Sure, if you're okay with that, people should have the ability to do that. So.
Okay, yeah, let's try that and see how it goes.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'd like to acknowledge all the folks, plus there's probably several more who have helped us along the way. On the top left, we have our Healthy Waters team members. Our team was put together in the spring of 2019. So we've been at this for 3 years. We've also had a lot of planning and technical assistance from other department staff across multiple programs in DNR, and then external partners you can see on the right-hand side. And I should just highlight that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has been instrumental in helping us, especially with the modeling and assessment work. Everybody knows this already, but just quickly, we have a lot of water resources in the state of Wisconsin. We are extremely water rich, especially relative
Pamela?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm still seeing your title slide. So I don't know if it's just me.
Same with me, Shri. Yeah, I'm glad
Okay.
you asked because I was about to
Okay.
ask.
Oh, you are. Okay, let's see here. Weird. Let me figure this out. Oh, okay, now is it working?
Yep, now it's
Okay.
the like today your looks like an outline slide.
Okay. Okay, I just covered this outline verbally. Background, modeling and assessment, and the action plan. And our props to our Healthy Waters team, as well as wealth of technical and planning assistance we received from programs within DNR and also our external partners. We all know Wisconsin is tremendously rich in water resources. You could circle the circumference of planet Earth almost 3 times with our stream miles. We have over 17,000 lakes, over 5 million acres of wetlands. Unfortunately, that's just about half probably of what we used to have, and 650 miles of Great Lake shoreline. So a lot to celebrate in our water-rich state. We know that most of those water resources are healthy. Too often we hear about impaired, polluted waters, blue-green algae blooms, all the challenges we have when really over 80% of our assessed waters in the state remain in good shape. We also know from bipartisan research nationally and in Wisconsin and regionally that the public support for water resource protection is high. Some of these surveys, it's like 95% of people support, for example, protecting land around water. We know that we have a lot of tourism money tied up in our water resources. For example, anglers and waterfowl hunters alone spend about $2 billion in the state. And fishing wise, we're usually just behind Florida. We're often the #2 state for people spending money on fishing specifically. And then more recently, things like climate change have become national priorities, as well as environmental justice and rural prosperity initiatives. So this effort really dovetails well with some of those initiatives that we're seeing nationally, both sort of on a policy side, but also the funding that's coming to states to manage some of these things. I mentioned that we all too often hear about impaired waters and the problems we have, and that's generally how our Clean Water Act funding is spent nationally. The EPA dug in recently to determine just how much are we spending on restoration versus protection. And this is 319 funding and our state revolving fund, national funds for state revolving fund investments. And only about 5% of it nationally is spent towards protection. There's some good examples out there though. For example, in the state of Maine, they made a deliberate decision that they will split their 319 money 50-50 between restoring impaired waters and protecting healthy waters. So we're trying to learn from these other state examples. Just an example, Wisconsin is no different as far as that funding distribution. On the left on this image is our 319 money. We get about $4 million a year. That funds 22 staff. We get about $2 million for project funding. And then there's other funding sources too. Whereas on the flip side over here, we have one rack and we have 6/10 of a staff, that's me, and no real dedicated funding for protection. So I am not suggesting, I just want to be clear that we take money away from restoration and put it on to protection, but there's ways to potentially open up eligibility for protection funding, for example, and sort of be innovative with the funding. And most watersheds are going to need restoration and protection work. So we could blend those racks a bit more. And I know EPA is digging deep into how to do that at a national scale. When our team kicked off, we were a little we were not clear on our scope. And around the same time, our water quality program here at DNR drafted a strategic plan. And the first goal in the strategic plan was to develop a statewide water resources protection program. So we were pretty excited as a team because within that strategic plan, it listed out the objectives for the DNR Water Resources Program. You can see them on the left. We want to increase capacity to provide technical assistance, increase utilization of funding, leverage and adapt existing program tools, and increase external awareness of the healthy waters themselves, as well as the program. So what our team did is we used that internal strategic plan to build a kickoff strategy. That's the cover here you see on the right. And we wanted to use that kickoff strategy to make partners aware and other programs in DNR that were growing or building this statewide water resources protection program, but we also wanted to use it to engage people and ask them what a protection program would look like. One of the first things we had to do was define a healthy watershed and a high quality water. And as many of you know, when you dig into definitions, it can be quite a challenge. So what we landed on was using the EPA's healthy watershed definition, which you see here. And I just want to highlight that the big driver in this definition is natural land cover. So our modeling really relies on natural land cover as sort of the primary model indicator. As far as our high quality waters definition, this is essentially a preponderance of evidence needs to show that a water body is high quality. And the three criteria we use for streams, rivers, and lakes are: it needs to be a unique or rare resource, it needs to be attaining state water quality standards, or it needs to have good to excellent biotic integrity. So two of those three things. We very deliberately included wetlands in this work. Wetlands have kind of flown under the radar as far as being included in some water resource programs historically. So all wetlands that are unique or in least disturbed reference condition are included. They don't get assessed for state water quality standards. So if a wetland is one or both of these things, it will be included as a high quality water. Our second step after those definitions was to figure out where exactly our healthy watersheds are. And we were really fortunate that a water quality staffer from Kentucky directed us to EPA's recovery potential screening tool. It's available on the web. It's Excel based. They use standardized indicators that they update every year or so, so it's repeatable. And the base unit is a HWHQW watershed. That's about a 30 square mile watershed. And that's what we use at DNR for our watershed assessment work and a lot of our reporting. So it gelled well with how we do business at DNR. I mentioned already just a few highlights. Natural land cover is a major driver of the model. Hydrological connectivity, I would say, is the next strongest driver. We know healthy watersheds and high quality waters are located throughout the state. And we've also provided the modeling and assessment results in a way that you can look at a statewide scale, which is the image on the right. But we also provided them by major drainage basin. And part of the reason we did that is because people were concerned this would be sort of just an up north program. And they wanted to know the healthiest watersheds remaining in like Southeast Wisconsin, for example. So the image on the right shows the results of the watershed health modeling, and you could see the most forested parts of the state and the areas with the most remaining natural land cover are the healthiest. And if you're wondering why these little indicators are on here, this was from a National Park Service webinar, and I'm talking with folks in California after this. I'm trying to provide some geographic context. I mentioned we can run the model at multiple scales. You'll see on the left, this is the results for the Lake Southwest Lake Superior Basin. This doesn't include the St. Louis River or South Central Lake Superior Basin. But again, the darker the blue, the healthier the watershed. And you may be asking yourself how the Apostle Islands could shake out as being not as healthy as some other watersheds. And the reason for this is that hydrological connectivity piece, because the Apostle Island influence on Lake Superior itself is very minimal. So watersheds where the natural land cover is directly influencing water resources are going to have higher health score, if that makes sense. So again, this is just relative to the direct influence on Lake Superior as a whole. Apostle Islands is pretty minimal. The model can be sorted at other watershed scales too. So I shared here on the right, you can see when we look at the major drainage basins in the state of Wisconsin, which watersheds are healthiest. And I'll be honest that I was surprised a little bit to see that St. Croix and the Southwest Lake Superior Basin are similar as far as health. I would have thought going into this that Lake Superior would be the healthiest. Also, just quickly want to mention that the model was peer reviewed and went through an internal review process for water quality and water resource biologists at DNR and our central office staff. And then we also had an opportunity for public comment and review. When we did our discussion groups, which I'll talk about in a little bit, we heard loud and clear that people wanted priorities. So going back to this image, certainly people can use this information for all of Lake Superior Basin, but the discussion group participants asked for priority areas, and we landed on prioritizing the 30% healthiest watersheds at a statewide scale. That's the map on the left here. And then the 30% healthiest which within each major drainage basin. So this center image you see is the Rock River drainage basin. And you can see in the map on the left, when you look at the statewide priorities, there are no HWHQWs that would land in that top 30% tier. But if we run the model only within the Rock River basin, you can see it obviously provides results with the top 30% healthiest here. And we've been digging into this a little bit more and talking to partners, and it's really interesting because where there's the best examples of ongoing protection work, sure enough, those dark blues are popping out as the healthiest. So in this Rock River basin, you can't see my pointer, but there's these dark blues along the eastern side of the Rock River Basin. That's at Conomowoc River watershed. And there's been a lot of protection work happening there for years. So it's interesting to me that where people are actively protecting land is corroborated by the model. Then the third step here is we've identified, so we have identified within these geographic priority areas, high quality waters. And you can see this is a Scuppernong Creek watershed zoomed out on the far right. And within that, the high quality waters are highlighted. There is Scuppernong Creek, Mud Creek, Ottawa Lake is that little blue lake up in the top right. And then there's several yellow dots that are a little bit tough to see, but those are high quality wetlands. So the idea of the overall program is that we want to protect healthy watersheds, to also protect high quality waters. And when we dug into the numbers on this, the majority of high quality waters do land in our geographic priority areas. So again, that sort of corroborates the model and its validity. So I will pause real quick because I know there's a lot of maps and assessment stuff here just to see if anybody has any clarifying questions.
Yeah, and feel free to unmute yourselves if you'd like.
Hi, Pamela. It's Cherie. How are you?
Hi, good. Hi.
Thanks so much I'm excited to kind of dig into what you've been working on. So for the Lake Superior Basin, at least on the current slide that you have up, it doesn't really even look like there's that many dark ones. I don't know if it would look different if we zoomed in on that watershed. But I am kind of surprised. And is this a level 1 assessment? I mean, would things change if we got on the ground, or just kind of better understanding what level we're at?
It's a screening tool. You
Okay.
know, the model itself is a screening tool, but we will not rerun the model till 2030.
Okay.
So and we would like to do like field verification and create sort of a field-based process to verify the model results in the
Sure.
next couple of years, but we're not there quite yet.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I know there was a targeted watershed assessment we did with Craig quite a few years ago for the Black River. And we thought that was a healthy water based on EP's original kind of assessment. So I know that's slightly different than yours, but it would be interesting to see based on his data and maybe how this model, a little bit of a comparison, because we had selected that watershed. So just a little bit more digging in would be interesting.
Mhm.
And looking more closely at the Lake Superior Basin, obviously, what we're kind of focused on and where we can undertake a project. I know we had shared that we're interested in piloting this effort in the Lake Superior Basin. There's some funding requests coming up, and there's a focus with Lake Superior partners on protection. So there are already some things underway, and there's lots of GLRI funding. So even though the Clean Water Act funding isn't funding protection, Great Lakes Restoration Initiative dollars are. If those Clean Water Act funds are already accounted for. So it'll be good to talk more now that you guys are ready.
Okay. Yeah. Sounds good.
And I had a different question about when you mentioned the natural land cover, I think is how it was put. I was wondering if you could maybe just expand on that, what that might mean, or like what the history of the land in the watershed, could it have been maybe, logged, but then natural land cover includes like native species again, or just kind of wondering what that I don't know if you would call it a criteria, but like how that was defined.
Yeah, I can't, I wonder after I go through this, if I can pull up. So EPA has well-defined indicators referencing their data sets.
Oh, okay,
And
that was from the EPA. Okay.
yeah, and if I'm recalling, it's forestry, grasslands, wetlands. It does not include ag or
Okay.
urban land use. So in your example, a logged area could still come up as natural land cover, provided, it's not ag or urban, basically.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and I
Yeah.
could always dig more into that EPA data if I want to get more details. Okay.
Yeah, and we have a technical report that goes into great detail on the indicators, and some of them were good fits and others were not. So we did have to sort of swap. And some indicators we created on our own with Wisconsin data sets, which was really nice that this model allowed us to use EPA's indicators, but build our own too.
Okay. I've been trying to put some of the links in the chat as you go. So I did put the website and the technical report. And as we go on, I can put a few more links in there.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't know enough about Lake Superior Basin, but I don't disagree with your observation, Cherie. It would be good to kind of dig in and figure out why maybe there aren't as many healthy watersheds as one would think. The only thing I can really come up with off the cuff right now is these dark blues elsewhere are mostly national forest lands.
Sure.
So, and those will just dominate the health aspect of the model because of all that natural land cover.
Yeah, and I mean, it's important to get started, I think, and this is a guide to help direct us, and we've got some places to focus, but I mean, long term, if we want to dig into that, I know just because of the partners, they've been working on a protection strategy for years as part of Lake Superior Lake-wide Action and Management Plan. What does protection look like? And I'm not quite sure where that plan is at. Lacey maybe could speak to that, but there's heavy interest in protection. So we're kind of natural partners to hopefully work with and maybe take it to another level. And because there's Great Lakes funding, maybe we could undertake a deeper dive into some of this where we might not have that opportunity other
Mhm.
places. But either way, I mean, I think this could be eye-opening too, that what we once thought was high quality, maybe it's not as high quality as we thought. I mean, it's kind of understanding the data and the criteria that were used, but maybe there's more work we need to do, which is good, in addition to protecting the highest of the high.
Okay. As far as moving on here, but high quality waters, these are all monitored and backed by empirical data. So just a little more detail on what we assessed for high quality waters. We looked at unique and rare communities and habitat, and you can see a list of example types of water bodies that would fit that category. We use Glipwick's most recent wild rice list, for example, and we added to it 2-story fishery lakes that have at least one native unstocked cold water species. We looked at water bodies that are attaining water quality standards. And then the third category is good to excellent biological condition. And this is determined by indices of biotic integrity, and it depends on the water body type as far as what index we would use. And I think I will mention here that there are some data gaps. For example, the University of Wisconsin system and tribal partners, it being sovereign tribal partners at least, don't need to provide their data to Wisconsin DNR. So you will occasionally see on the list, an example that popped out to me was Trout Lake in Vilas County is not on the high quality waters list. And the main reason why is because the University of Wisconsin, Madison doesn't provide their data to us at DNR. And that'll be similar for some water bodies within tribal lands, for example, may not be on the list. We'd like in the future, in the next few years here, to try and partner and collect as much data as we can so we have a more accurate reflection of high quality waters. So I just shared a bunch of maps and information, and we already have some sort of technical observations and questions. So I wanted to let you know that we do have a viewer. All these data are in the viewer, and you could click on a specific water body and know if it's high quality waters or a high quality water or not. You can also click on the watershed to understand if it's a geographic priority area. You can also look at like the final score. So these are scored from 0 to 1 in watershed health. So 0.99 is the highest score a watershed could get. So you can better understand relative to all the watersheds in the state, how it scores, or within a drainage basin. We need to do some more work on this viewer as far as directions and content, but the information is in our watershed restoration and protection viewer. We also have PDF dashboards that we created because we weren't totally sure if we'd get the information in the viewer in time. The person who had been doing that work has since left DNR. But on the right here, or top right, is an example for Southwest Lake Superior Basin of a dashboard. And you can see in Lake Superior Basin, the individual watersheds are numbered. So these would be the 30% healthiest in the basin. And then they're listed out in this table. So for Lake Superior Basin, the Bad River is the healthiest. Score wise, we also identified how many high quality waters are within that individual HUC 12 if we have information on the water bodies. The Bad River is a good example, again, where we probably don't have as much information at the department because tribes are collecting a lot of that information. So basically a way to, as we move forward in the future, to continue measuring and get to the bottom of the numbers as far as where the high quality waters are relative to these healthy watersheds. And then finally, we have PDF maps, and it's in the viewer too. You can go by county and be able to see the list of high quality water bodies within the county. This example in the center of the screen is for Douglas County. And there's many more high quality waters in Douglas County than you see here. And then there's a column in here that tells you if it's in a priority watershed area. So is it the top 30% statewide? Is it top 30% in the given HUC 6? And is it top 30% for both? And it just when you look at these, it's very clear by individual county that most of the priority watersheds are in the north. So shifting gears to the action plan, I just wanted to cover a bit here. I talked about our modeling and assessment work and our kickoff strategy, which we shared in spring of 2021. Then I think April through June of last year, we did virtual discussion groups, and I know several people who are on the call participated in those, so thank you for that. We used the feedback from the discussion groups to formulate the action plan, and as I mentioned, we just released the action plan in April. The overall goal is to keep 100% of the healthy watersheds and high quality waters in that state through 2030. A little bit about the discussion groups. We weren't quite exactly sure how they'd go down because we had visions of doing like in-person open houses, but then COVID hit. And as it turned out, we consider this a win. We had 8 discussion groups with over 160 people representing 93 organizations. We had about 90 pages of notes and a ton of great feedback. On the bottom of this slide, it shows the partners who participate in the discussion groups. We tried to set them up by partner group. So we basically had 5 clusters of partner groups. A few of these, we did 2 discussion groups with them. And we asked questions about what people are already doing protection wise, because we wanted to better understand, success stories and lessons learned. We also wanted to understand how people would use the results. And then questions 3 through 6 are really the questions we asked to try and get at those objectives in our strategic plan and to build this program. We had top 10 themes that we shared in our discussion group summary, and they didn't really translate into action, but here's 5, or is it 6? 5 of the themes, excuse me, that we heard, but people are really super excited to do this. And it's been a long time coming is kind of the message we heard. We also heard very clearly that this is a community effort, and that certainly DNR is not going to protect water resources without working very closely in communities. And often, or perhaps sometimes I should say, partners can take the information and run with it, perhaps independently of DNR. We also heard frustration with regulations and sort of the scaling back of some environmental protection policies in the last 10 to 15 years, and people wanted this to be non-regulatory and voluntary, at least at first. That's not to say down the road that there might not be opportunities to make some regulatory moves, but the time for that is not now. And then geographic priorities were widely supported and asked for, and people want to see, protection rise to the surface as an equal partner to a lot of the restoration work that's been done in Wisconsin. So the action plan itself is aspirational. It's not necessarily a work plan, and it definitely is not a DNR only plan. We included 25 recommended actions and sorted them by those 4 main objectives. And I will share that the actions were suggested by a majority of partner groups. So we took a really democratic process when we went through the notes and all the feedback that people had shared across the partner groups. And basically, if 3 of 5 of these partner groups had suggested something, we included it as an action. We also suggest strategies for implementation, again, using some of the success stories of partners. And we kind of struggled a bit with this idea of we didn't want to prescribe the time because there's some uncertainty as far as future funding and staffing support and partner interests. But we knew there are things we could do now versus things that might be out in the future. It might even require legislative or executive action. So the actions are sorted by now, next, and for the future. And we're working on the nows right now. We also identified who might take the lead. So when you read through the action plan, you'll see multiple partners could potentially take a lead on an action. And in some cases, DNR is not highlighted because DNR is not well positioned to do some of those actions. for example, change regulations. We don't directly change regulations. That would be a legislative action, but partners might be able to persuade to that end. So I'm just going to walk through a couple of the actions and what success looks like. Down below in the table is that first objective, increase capacity to provide technical assistance. We have a couple example actions listed. And you can see we want to continue to collaborate and establish formal opportunities or groups to coordinate the action plan. So success would really look like cross-program and external partners working together on priority work, like defining BMPs for protection, digging into funding options and communications. It would be nice if funding could be dedicated or perhaps adapted to do some of this protection work. And Cherie offered up GLRI, which is a great suggestion, for example. As far as the second objective, which was to leverage and adapt existing program tools to achieve results, we have suggested that the Healthy Watershed High Quality Waters Action Plan be integrated into other planning efforts. So at the department, it would be like the 50-year land acquisition plan, our wildlife and forestry action plans, but certainly a county land and water department could integrate the information, or if there was a broader Lake Superior regional plan, for example. And we might want to evaluate existing DNR resource designations and update them down the road based on this new information. So again, success just looks like people using this information and our team continuing to learn from other people's protection and planning efforts. A quick little aside here, and I'm really excited about this map, and it's could be independent of the Healthy Watersheds effort, but this is the first time that DNR has a map that overlays multiple program priorities. And it's based at this HWHQW watershed scale, but we've integrated forestry, ecological landscape priorities, wildlife conservation opportunity areas, fisheries, brook trout, environmental resilience reserves, and our protection-based watersheds that are in approved TMDL areas, total maximum daily load areas. And then we also added the count of local capacity organizations, so like lake, river, and watershed groups, and freshwater fishing demand to get at recreational use. And I'm sharing this because the darker the blue, the more people and programs and potential funding to leverage to get good work done. So I think this could be used by other partners and programs, again, regardless of this water resource protection program. As far as increasing utilization of funding for water resources protection, we would like to balance that Clean Water Act federal funding with eligible protection activities. And then there's other funding. Again, GLRI was mentioned. There's U.S. Forest Service landscape scale restoration funding. We're working a little bit with Minnesota and Michigan to try and form like a collaborative partnership to perhaps seek that funding in the future. On the right here is an example. I had mentioned earlier that EPA is kind of pushing states to think about funding more protection work. And they recently put out a guidance about how the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and 319 funds can be used. And you can see some of these yellow highlighted activities are protection based. So the most obvious one is land acquisition for watershed protection. Right now in Wisconsin, we don't use that funding for that, but we could. So hopefully down the road, we can adapt the eligibility to include more protection projects. It sounds like Erin's been sending or putting a lot of these resources in the chat, just a resource list. If you could even Google HWHQW and this comes up. First, it's a long kind of goofy acronym, but the good thing is that there aren't many other or any other acronyms like it. But we have our action plan, we have a kickoff strategy, we have a really good discussion group summary that has a lot of specific examples of the projects people are already working on protection wise. And then we have a detailed technical report that gets into the nuances of the modeling. And I also shared that we have a web viewer and those information dashboards. we are currently kind of gearing up to pivot to implementation. And we plan to have some workshops and trainings down the road. We're not sure exactly what those will look like, but one thing is we really want people to be comfortable using the modeling and assessment results. We know from a prior Healthy Watershed effort in 2013 that the usability of the information was a challenge. So we want to kind of do that better this time around. If you go to our website, you can subscribe to updates about this initiative. This is a real low volume communication tool. So if there's something specific and pertinent, this is the means that we would use to get the word out. So I'd suggest if you're interested in this, signing up for this delivery email messaging system. So next steps, we are currently kind of pivoting to implementation. As I mentioned, we think we know what that looks like, but we're not absolutely certain. We know that some of those major objective areas need more input from other programs and partners. So specifically, we could use some help on technical assistance and BMPs, the funding piece and communications. So if anybody was interested, perhaps in a future workshop or even like a, small team working on that topic, they can let me know. We want to train people how to use the modeling and assessment results. And then kind of a first step on the implementation side is we want to celebrate and help people celebrate the successes they've had with protection work. An example in the north is the work that Ashland County and Wisconsin Wetlands Association are doing with natural flood management. I mentioned the Oconomowoc River Watershed Protection Project in Southeast Wisconsin. So we'd like to highlight those case studies so people can learn from each other. That was one of the big things in the discussion groups is there's all sorts of great work going on, but people might not know it's going on. So we think we might be able to help with that. And then I have a list of FAQs here. I don't think I'm going to go through them because I'd rather if you want to ask questions and we chat a little bit. But for my purposes, if you have an FAQ in your head that you're kind of like, well, this doesn't make sense, or what about this or that, I'm going to track it here because eventually we'll have an FAQ type document to go along with the Healthy Watersheds High Quality Waters Initiative. So unless people want me to talk through these are intended a little more for general public. I'm just kind of scrolling here, but should I go through these, or do other people have questions that they'd prefer to use the time to talk through other things?
And just want to say again, folks can feel free to unmute themselves. There are a couple comments in the chat I could read out. Let's see. Or Karina, do you want to say your, I don't know if it's a question out loud. I'm not sure I can do it justice.
Sure. I think I was zooming in on that slide while you had it with the Venn diagram of the things that can be funded with 319 funds and clean. Yeah, that one. I was just interested in where I could find that another day and look at it more closely, I guess, or if we could have that slide. I just, that was useful and didn't get to see it all. So thanks.
Yeah, there's a whole guidance on this. I could send it to Erin.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, if that's something I could add to the follow-up email to everybody who registered for the webinar. And I can't remember, Pamela, if we talked about it, but if you had a copy of your presentation that was able to be shared, we could do that too. But if it's just like some sub takeaways, that's fine too.
Yeah, I can definitely share a copy of it.
Okay. And I mean, it's being recorded. I'm going to put this on the collaborative YouTube page too. Yeah, I agree. That's a helpful diagram to see. And there was one other comment from Lacey that there's a GLRI terrestrial habitat connectivity working group with a pilot area that includes parts of the UP in northern Wisconsin. I didn't know about that. There's one thing you mentioned, potential for future training on how to use the modeling and assessment results. I definitely think I might be following up with you about that, because that seems like something if Lake Superior Collaborative partners or folks working in the region kind of wanted to embrace this action plan. And one of my questions was going to be, what would be like the recommended next steps? I know you talked about integrating it into other existing plans, but I think we've often get a lot of requests for different trainings, and I wonder if you've offered anything like that, or you could speak a little more to it, what it might look like.
Well, can you, I'm not muted. Okay. We will probably have a suite of training options, from a webinar to hands-on training workshops to written guidance. So multiple opportunities. We haven't scheduled them yet. And I think we'd probably kick off with the written guidance and the webinar. And then when there's partners who are really jazzed and kind of ready to go, do more of the hands-on approach. An example is Polk County reached out today because they want to use the information, and their plan is to monitor the water bodies that have not been monitored, to try and get them on the high quality waters list, or at least know if they should be on there in the future. So that's a real specific example where we could go to if they have healthy watershed priority areas in the county, identify water bodies within them that have not been monitored, and come up with a monitoring plan. And then I think there'd be more general, just how to use the viewer, especially because there's clicking things on and off and toggling. So it kind of depends on the purpose of the partner interest. If they're going to use the results for something really detailed, or they want to know just more how to navigate the viewer. But I'd say stay tuned for that. It probably would, I'm thinking fall, we might start those trainings, maybe late summer.
Yeah, and I guess I should back up. This is all pretty new. You're kind of launching this, right? So I feel like I'm oh, what trainings? And I understand it's all still in development, but it's exciting. And I see Sheree put a comment in the chat, yeah, about piloting this effort in the Lake Superior Basin. Yeah, and I was thinking the same thing, Sheree, about the collaborative action plan, trying to incorporate this.
I thought that was something I included when we commented, but I'm not sure if that actually made it in the action plan.
I'll definitely be double checking that after today. Pamela, can you see the chat? It looks like Sheila has a question. And if you want to unmute yourself, Sheila, feel free, or I can just read it out loud.
I can see it, and that's an excellent question. And we would love to see people develop watershed-based plans. And in Maine, for example, they have an alternative watershed based 9 key element plan for protection purposes. And it's a much more simple than a standard 9 key element plan. So we're considering kind of creating a template watershed protection plan that people could use locally. And certainly people can do their planning however they want, but we want to try and make it easier and less intimidating, especially because 9 key element plans can be very expensive and take a long time. But that's one idea or direction we're headed. Did I answer that okay, Sheila?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then Marengo was a protection. It was the first 9 key element protection based plan in the state, as far as I understand it.
Pamela, we just had the Lake Superior Collaborative Symposium, and there's some work being done by Northland College in a lot of the lakes. I'll have to get you the connection. They have got a new staff person who's focused on inland lakes, and I asked him to connect with you because the work they were doing there seemed to align with Healthy Waters. So, we're connecting you together with him. I mean, maybe there'd be tweaks, maybe there would be slightly different approaches, but incorporating the Healthy Watershed, this initiative, into that and thinking about next steps. So I'll email you with his information. I can't think of his name right off the top of my head, but he did follow up after the symposium when I made that recommendation. So I know I've got an email to forward off to you. He's not here today, which is a bummer. Yeah, that's who it is, Peter Levi. Thank you.
Oh, okay. He sent me an email
Awesome.
today. Mhm.
Okay, great.
So I just want to do a little test. It's not a test, but gut check, let's call it. When I shared this list, and I don't know if you can you read these watershed protection priorities here? Or is it too
They're pretty
small?
tiny for
Okay.
me, at least.
Let me see if I can go back here.
Are those the creek names, river names?
Yeah. I'm mostly curious if people think so. Going back, I guess, to the concern that maybe there aren't as many Lake Superior Basin or specific Lake Superior Basin watersheds, showing up on the priority list. This is the 30% healthiest within that Southwest Lake Superior Basin, HWHQW. And I am not a person who works nearly as much as others in the Lake Superior Basin, but I'm curious if this, if your gut says, yep, that looks pretty good.
Pamela, I don't know all of them, but the ones that I do know, it makes sense.
Okay. Good.
Well, maybe that's something the collaborative, can undertake. I don't know, Erin. I know we have some work groups. And Lacey's going to be leading with Kyle McGarry, the Slow the Flow work group. Maybe through that work group, it's not just those watersheds where we need to slow the flow, but the watersheds that are already doing a good job and making sure we're protecting those. That was something I think Naomi pointed out during the symposium. So just something to think about, how do we incorporate this work and these priority watersheds into the slow the flow efforts, which is going to there's a kind of a group of folks, Pamela, working on that.
Well, and that's one of the things we've been discussing too, is, modeling prioritization efforts. So this is excellent, and we'll be bringing this forward in the conversations as well. But yeah, that's one of the conversations we've been having, is prioritization and protection efforts too. So
Lacey, you're probably loving all these maps.
yeah, that's why I've been slow to unmute. I've been checking everything out.
Yeah, I think that viewer tool is awesome. And I've also been really intrigued by the maps, because I know a lot of times in meetings, this is exactly, I think, what folks seem to be needing, is a map like this, with, even if it's, like you said, it's a first kind of swipe at it to see how things shook out in this modeling tool is really helpful. I don't know, it's helpful for me, and I hope it will be helpful for others. Yeah, thank you so much, Pamela. Yeah, I guess we did use the time. I'll definitely be following up with everybody that registered, sharing different links, and the recording will go on the collaborative YouTube page. Yeah, any final thoughts, Pamela, or I tried to get you to your other meeting.
Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me and the interest. And I mentioned the uncertainty involved with this, and in a way it's kind of exciting, because this is pretty new ground. And as far as we know, as a state, Wisconsin will be the first state to have a statewide water resources protection program, at least as one is comprehensive. So the more we can work with partners to clear up the uncertainty in the future and have some, real successes, and maybe focus on these geographic areas and learn what people are already doing and sort of sharing their work, the better. And I guess I would just close with, I know in Lake Superior Basin, there is a lot of protection work going on. And it seems like the biggest and first challenge is people can't really comprehend what protection means and what that work entails. So I'm looking forward to, hearing more from you and learning about the collaborative and local partners and projects that are being done too.
So thanks. What a nice closing remark. All right, well, I'm gonna, I guess, wrap us up and stop the recording. And thanks everybody for coming.